So we are streaming whenever we're ready.
Did Pam respond to the doodle poll?
I did not see a response.
I think we probably better get started then.
Who would like to call the meeting to order?
I can call it to order. Calling to order the subcommittee meeting for the budget for the Tiverton Library. Today is October 19th, 5 p.m.
Great. So I know we just have one agenda item, which is our discussion of fiscal year 21. So would you like me to go through line by line, or would you like to start with certain questions about different lines? Let me know how you would like to proceed.
If I can speak for a second, I did a little bit of work going through the budget, and I really have like 3 areas of concern. I don't know, most of the service contracts, the tech maintenance replacement, that seems pretty straightforward to me. I concentrated on some of the bigger items. I mean, unless you want to, you can go through a line by line if you want. We can ask questions at that point. It's up to you.
That's okay with me. Absolutely. Let me just pull up my Excel sheet here. And I'm going to have my Excel sheet on my screen. So I'll stop at the end of each line and just ask if there are any questions.
Okay.
Let me see if I can clear some tabs so I can see you. Okay. Okay, so starting off, we have in expenditures, our first line, which is electricity. This has been a bit up in the air right now due to this electrical consumption issue that we've been having. So what I did is for the past, I think it's 5 fiscal years that we have, I took the highest amount for each month and put that into this year's figure. And that's how we came up with $42,100 for electric. This again is still up in the air, and I'm still working with a couple of our different vendors to see where this is coming from, but it's all pointing to the HVAC system. So we've at least narrowed it down to that, which is good. So I do sort of see an end in sight. It's just in the meantime, things are much different from years past there.
Catherine, it did seem that Union Library had an unexpected spike in electric usage too. Is that correct?
Let's take a look. So for fiscal year 20, are you looking at?
Where did you include Union Library expenses? I don't know which tab I saw.
It's under the electricity tab, and then if you scroll down below the main library's electric usage, you'll see Union National Grid.
Yes.
So we were
like July 19 versus July 20. That was quite a jump.
Yes. And one of the things that I attribute that to is reopening on Saturdays at the Union Library. So that was actually, we reopened, it was Saturdays at Union, June 2019. So that July was the first July back open for quite some time.
Right, but even between July 19 was a little over 1,000, and July of this year was over 1,400. So that's like a 40% increase.
So that was actually July of last year, July 2019, which is when we were open the Saturdays. This year, fiscal year 21, we were at 725. And I would say that's mostly due to there being less people in the building. We had only just reopened at the end of that month. So there was not a staff member in there the regular days.
So the FY19 is July of 2018.
Yes, yep,
which was about 1,000, and July of 2019 was that 40% increase because that was the first July with Saturdays open?
correct.
All right, and then this July, it went in half just because, were they open at all?
No, nope.
No. Oh, okay. So it really is just the main library that had this huge spike. And the HVAC, meaning that our, the cooling, the air conditioning is somehow eating up a lot more electricity. It's incredibly inefficient. What's going on?
So it seems there may be some issue with the control system. The computer system is what we're sort of leaning towards right now. We had GM Refrigeration as our HVAC servicing company. And so they came through and they checked out all of the recommendations from the energy auditor. And they said everything checked out, everything was running as normal. But they sort of suspected that possibly the software that we have, even when the building is considered unoccupied, which it sets it to a higher set point, so there's less energy consumption and less cooling or even less heating during the winter months. So I have a call in to Corel Controls and they will hopefully be out here next week. They were here back in March and they didn't find any issue. So now we're going to circle back around to really pull that system apart and see if that is the culprit, which I think it could be. But again, I wish I were an expert.
Do we have a manual override system, whereas the last person out can set the temperature, in the summer to 80 degrees or in the winter to 60, so we're not dependent on maybe faulty software?
So typically, no, just because we have 5 different rooftop units. But I think that we should probably consider some sort of switch with the HVAC, because even right now, when I went into the system to look and see if I could do that and, set it to, 82 or even 85 during the summer at night, it's not possible for us to do that. We have to do it with the scheduler, which could be the issue, is that it's not actually going into that scheduled mode.
Right.
See what you did with the usage. You basically replicated what happened last year, effectively, because last year was when I say last year, last fiscal year is when you had the highest usage.
Yes.
Okay, so when I looked at it, what it says is that electricity cost is going to go up about 20% year over year. Now, that assumes that whatever we incur for this upcoming fiscal year replicates what happened last year. And the issue really started happening early on in, well, I guess fiscal 20, but really it's July of 2019 is when it started ramping up quite a bit.
July of 2020, this year.
I'm sorry, July of 20. Sorry about that. Yes, you're right. Yeah. Well, actually, it started before that. It actually started ramping up. If I'm looking at the analysis I looked at, it really started ramping up the prior year, probably around March of 2020.
Yes.
Then it started ramping and really ramped up in the summer months because of the air conditioning, I'm assuming. Yeah. Okay. Now, what happens? So, is it possible that once this is resolved, the usage will actually decrease?
I hope it will. That is definitely the hope, and that's what I'm hoping that Corel Controls will tell us next week. I have even set the scheduling manager to, start right when we get in the building. It was starting, around 8 a.m., which we're not in the building, so yeah. I don't think we need it that early. And it was going right up until 8 p.m. So I even put it to 7 p.m. myself. But I don't think we've seen a big enough decrease. So I'm hoping that when the issue is resolved, that we can make those permanent changes to the schedule.
The only way you can do a manual override is not really a manual override. It's kind of a hybrid. You have to use the scheduling system.
Yes, yep. And even then, that is something that was mentioned that could not be working correctly right now. So I am hoping that we can really pull that apart next week.
Okay. All right. So when will they be able to determine if it's the controls and the computer controls?
They should be, I have a call into them. I asked that they not do it late last week. So hopefully they'll be in this week or next week.
Okay.
Catherine, did you ever try putting out desktop like thermometers to try to get a reading for, you know, what the temperature was in the library at midnight and 2 a.m. during the summertime?
We didn't do that per se, but I can see in the scheduling manager that it is saying that the temperatures change. And I could tell a difference when we came in the morning, like in the colder months, that the heat hadn't kicked on until right when we got in.
But it's really not the heat that's costing us, it's the
Exactly.
the cooling.
Yeah,
So
the cooling.
Sounds like whatever readings we're getting from that software are inaccurate, or, you know, and that it must have been cooling the library all night long.
That's what I'm kind of thinking. And I really hope that is it, because that would make it so, you know, we can replace the software, we can get that fixed in there, and then we won't have to worry about that issue when the air conditioning kicks on later next year.
And how old is that software system?
It is 5 years old, and actually it was recommended that we would most likely need to replace it next year because they will stop providing updates for it. 5 years sounds kind of young, but if you think about it, it's basically like any other computer that you use, whether it be a desktop or a laptop. And, you know, after 5 years, it's going to start to run slow. Maybe certain things need to be updated, but I'm not sure how old it was when we first got it. That's another thing too. And sometimes they just phase software out. So I'm hoping that Corel can provide some answers to that.
So they don't do maintenance upgrades on an annual basis on the software?
So they did, but back when they were here in March and they recommended that, you know, I had them in to say, you know, we need to do this upgrade. It's usually around $600 per upgrade.
Yeah.
They had said that if we upgraded this final upgrade of the software, it would put the computer to a higher stress level and put a lot more stress on the computer, which could limit its life a little more. So yes, so they did not do the update in March, but said, you know, for the calendar year 2021, you're going to want to think about having a computer replacement in there.
Okay.
And how about we just do that early and see if
like
that
to.
solves the problem? Because
Yes.
we have to do it 6 months from now anyway. And we want, I mean, my feeling is we might as well do it now, and maybe that'll solve the problem.
I think so too. And that was one of the things that I've been thinking about, is when they came in just to say, you know, we're ready for it. So,
right.
Because it does control a really great deal of our budget and our systems in the library, and pretty much a lot of things. We're very dependent on the system. So for right now, I have $42,100 in that line. And I realize that we may need some flexibility depending on how the system goes. But I think that is a good estimate for now. And should we need to look at that again later in the year, then we can always do that.
Seems reasonable.
Okay. Any other questions about electricity? And if not, I'll move on to heat. Okay. So heat. So we made a really good decision last year to purchase the propane tank, the in-ground propane tank. With that purchase, we were able to go out to bid for propane and significantly lower our cost per gallon. So right now we're at $1.22 per gallon. We typically think about 12,000 gallons per year. I know as long as I've been here, that's sort of been the baseline for how we budget for this line for the main library. So I would recommend budgeting for 13,000 gallons just in case it is a cold winter. And also we are thinking about added hand washing and hot water. We of course don't have the same number of people coming through, but we're definitely using faucets more and using hot water more. So my estimate would be 13,000 gallons at $1.22 is right under $16,000 for the main library propane usage. And Union also has oil, and that contract is being negotiated right now, I believe. Union is on the town's contract. We still pay that cost, but it's included in the whoever the vendor the town uses. And that was at $2.27 a gallon last year. So I'm going to estimate around 500 gallons at that price. And we're just over $1,000. So I felt that 17,000 altogether was a pretty good estimate for heat. And should we need more or less, I would of course come to you all about that. And we could talk about that later in the year.
Question.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the usage, and fiscal 2020 far exceeds fiscal 19 and fiscal 18, 17, and 16. So, and it was like 15,197. How do we get from that down to 13,000?
Okay, so that's a great question. Back in May of 2020, you'll notice in fiscal year 16 through 19, we don't typically have very large fills, and those will take us through the summer. We had our new company come in May 2020, so they gave us almost a full fill. We have a 1990 is the number of gallons that tank can hold. So they gave us almost a full fill. We did not need a fill until it was one of the last few days of September, and they put in about 500 gallons. So we're already below July, August, and September for the past couple of years where that was. So we needed 500 gallons. So that.
Go ahead, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay.
No, go ahead, finish, I'm sorry.
So that May fill was very large. Some of the other months in there do seem a little bit high. And I really, January has been pretty cold last year, it seems like.
What's the tank capacity?
1,990 gallons, so 1990.
Okay. Well, the only concern I would have is if they're putting in 2,000 gallons, it means you must have used that prior. So I guess I'm a little confused by the big drop. That's the confusion I have. I understand they would have come in and did a big fill, but it's because the tank was empty and you must have used the propane gas. That's why you had a big fill. In other words, it's not like they can come in and just give you more than what the tank holds. They can only bring you what the tank holds. So I guess I'm confused by that.
So the months where we had over 1990, that would have been 2, sometimes 3 fills, depending on the month and the heat that we were using.
Which means that you used quite a bit of propane. That's what I'm not getting. And I understand. In other words, we assuming that this year is going to be a warmer year.
I've typically used 12,000 gallons for the past couple of years, and that has looked like it's worked. So if you think that
I'm just looking at the facts, and the facts say there's a big jump in fiscal year 2020, which would have started, say, January of 2020, so versus January 2019. So in other words, you have a beginning balance and ending balance, but either way, the fact that they've come in and put propane in says you consumed it. So maybe at some point in time, maybe the 13 will true up, but I guess my question is, if that doesn't happen, where do the funds come from?
So if it doesn't happen, then we would have to look elsewhere in the budget to see where we could pull those funds from. So
Right.
if we would prefer to estimate higher this year, that is absolutely okay with me.
13 seems
Oh, you muted yourself, Sandy.
reasonable. 13 seems reasonable in line with prior years, but except for fiscal year 20, that's the only outlier, if you will. That's why,
Yep.
I mean, I'm okay with that. It's just that we should be prepared at some point later in the year. Maybe 13 won't be enough. That's the only reason I'm raising it.
Yes, yes. I think that is one of the things that we're always sort of cautious of, especially with how different the weather can be here and unpredictable it can be. So
I just thought of something. The timing of when they do their fills could affect the comparison from year to year because fiscal 19 dropped off quite a bit compared to the prior year. So it's possible some of it's timing. I'll concede that. I get it.
Yes, and like I said too, we really only needed a small fill in September.
Yep.
So some of what
Okay.
we had in May is still there, which is
I'm good with that. I'm good.
Okay.
I just had to get it out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other issue is I wonder if our software has been fluky, if that started going fluky during heating season.
It's a good question. That is a great question. And something that I did not realize that our system did is that if it feels the cooling is almost too cool, then our heat kicks on.
Oh.
So even on sort of like the 65-ish degree days, if our AC is blowing at a cooler rate because of the outside air or something like that, then we can have the AC and the heat on sometimes at the same time.
Yeah.
And I don't really like that. I would prefer to really talk in depth about why that's happening. We have a pretty well insulated building. So I have personally shut the heat off.
Wasn't it LEED
in some
certified?
rooms.
Isn't that a LEED
Sorry?
certified building?
It was, yes.
Yeah.
So I can actually control the heat. The air conditioning is a whole other story, but the heat, with that supplemental heating that we have coming in, those are things that I can turn off. So if I hear it in my office, it's off. I'm going to turn it off. In the community room, when no one's using it, we can turn it off, things like that. The one thing that I will mention to you that is definitely a thought for some capital funds or even a grant in the future that the energy auditor mentioned is that some buildings are more aggressive with having different control systems for each of their HVAC units and having different schedules for those. So a room like, say, our reading room, which is way back in the building, we might be able to get a system where we could turn that off at, say, 6 p.m. and let the rest of the building sort of heat that room from what it's providing or cool that room. So I thought that was a great suggestion. I also think that controlling our meeting rooms on different schedules would be something that we might want to look into. So there's a lot of balls up in the air with our heating, cooling, things like that.
Okay. I'm good.
Okay. So we are at 17,000 for our heat. Communications is something, so this is our contract with Rhode Island Telephone is the majority of this line. And like I mentioned, the cost doesn't go up there. It's more the taxes that fluctuate, which is the hard thing for us. We also include postage in there for things like our interlibrary loan services. And I did decrease that a little bit since we haven't had that many interlibrary loans. And our deluxe hosting web plan was renewed this year. So that was where another 250 was added into that line. So that line's pretty straightforward. Okay. Okay. Water is up next. And this was another issue that we had. There are no shortage of things to keep me busy with this building. the toilet issue that I had mentioned, we had 2 toilets in the women's restroom actually malfunction within sort of a couple days of each other. So they were continuously running. We also had an HVAC servicing call where they cleaned the coils of our rooftop unit. So they were using a significant amount of water for that as well. So we kind of had this increase over the past quarter for this bill. And then another thing was that with the siding work, they were also using water as well. So those factors put our water bill above what it normally is. So I did increase this. One of the big things that came into play this year also was the fire service fee. It's $349 from North Tiverton Water District. So this is because we have an unmetered sprinkler line. And I know this was the topic of discussion at a previous trustee meeting. And there's really nothing that we could do about this fee that we get every year. It's tacked onto each bill. So they divide that $349 by 4 since we have quarterly bills. And so that's incorporated in there. Okay, let's see. So water stands at 1,200. Okay, so maintenance is the next line. And this is probably where the breakout of one of the tabs that I gave you is pretty good as far as where all of this comes from. So we, of course, use ice melt in here. We have mowing in here. The big factor in this line is building repairs, and that's at around 8,000, I estimated. I do think this is going to be a tough line for us this year, just with how much I've been taking care of. And I think that this is something that I would like to make a lot of tracks on this year. There are still things from the building inspectors list that I would like to take care of. I pretty much have a running list of things that I would like to take care of in the building, either that one of our vendors has mentioned or that the building inspector or DPW has mentioned. And so I think that what I'd like to do with this maintenance line is every month at the trustees meeting, really break down what is going into this each month and run by you all certain things like parking lot seal coat and paint or fall and spring cleanup, so that we can make sure that we're both taking care of the building, but in a fiscally responsible way. So my plan for this is to budget $18,700 and then sort of assess each month how we're doing with that and see if there's going to be any wiggle room for us to, you know, buy more light bulbs so that we can make sure we have those on hand. Another thing in this line is building and cleaning supplies. And so our COVID supplies have really been a lot this year. Normally we only have about $1,500 worth of cleaning supplies, toilet paper, things like that. But this year, I think it's going to be closer to $3,500. And I say that because of just all the cleaning supplies, the attic cleaning. And we actually never purchased toilet paper before. And not toilet paper, we have toilet paper, paper towels. That wasn't something that we purchased. We used the air hand dryers and also reusable hand cloths on the staff side of things and the air dryers for patrons. So this is something that is a completely new expense for us. And those are in the patron restrooms and also in our staff restrooms as well, and at the other staff sink locations. So this is something I'm going to watch like a hawk.
Could I ask, why did we go away from the air blowers in the public restrooms to paper towels?
So it's not recommended to have that interior air circulation right now due to COVID.
Interesting, because I would have thought that it's, you know, better to use the air and not have virus on paper towels. But they say they don't want blowing around virus in the air. So yes, use the paper towels. Oh, interesting.
Yes, and an interesting expense it is. So I would love to go back to air dryers. It's a lot of waste, and it's
Right.
something
And
that,
mess. It's just
yes,
unsightly, you know?
yeah, yes. And I think that it is just something that we will eventually go back to just the air dryers when we can. So we're stuck with paper towels for a little while right now. And this is something that I think is going to be around 3,500 for the building and cleaning supplies. Also, the siding repairs were incorporated in this, and at the meeting at 7 p.m., I'll mention that the check did go through for that. So we are all set with siding repairs, and I included that in this number as well. So that's actually already paid for, which is good. The other thing too is that originally the town budget back in February included 15,000 in capital funds for us. So a lot of the things that we're going to be taking care of in this line were things that could have been incorporated into those capital funds from the town. So we will sort of have to make sure that those are included in what we're looking at here.
Which brings up another question I had. I know that that we had the FTR and they passed the budget, but I did recently read that the town council was trying to get the state to waive the maintenance of effort requirements for both schools and libraries. And would that redo our budget that was passed by the FTR? Do you have any idea?
I don't think so. I did watch that town council meeting, and they had only discussed the schools at this point. I haven't seen any legislation going around or, support going around to have a maintenance of effort reduction for libraries yet, but it is something I'm keeping an eye on. Also, as a reminder, we do have a waiver process right now, but the town has to prove that any reduction in our budget is consistent with all other town departments. So that is something that we already have in place with that waiver process.
I guess my question was really, after the voters had approved a budget at the FTR, could the town council make reductions?
That's a good question. I don't know if they could.
Something like the schools or the libraries, as opposed to the town council making a reduction in a town hall expense that they actually have fiscal responsibility for.
Yeah.
Okay, again, I don't know much about it, but I would think if they were going to apply for a waiver, they'd have to do it prior to the budget, because it's I don't think they can't really do it after the fact. It's not really fair, because you're actually going forward and approving budgets for everyone. In other words, if they wanted to do that, they would have done it when the library went to the town, the budget committee for approval of their budget. The town would have said, okay, here's what we're doing. We're applying for a waiver. We're cutting you by $100,000. I mean, I would think at that point is when you have to know. It's not fair after the fact.
Right. But the discussion you heard, Catherine, that was about the current fiscal year, FY21?
It didn't sound like it. It sounded like fiscal year 22. I could be incorrect. I'll have to go back and watch. But actually, the town administrator has asked for fiscal year 22 budget towards the end of October. So I know we're going to be starting on fiscal year 22 pretty much as soon as this fiscal year 21 budget is set, so that we can pass it on to the town probably by the November trustee meeting. That would be approved.
Yeah, so maybe that was it. They were anticipating putting together FY22 budgets.
That would make more sense.
Yeah.
Yes.
It just seems kind of early, because our FY21 budget just got passed in September, a month ago.
Yes, that's correct. And also the state budget, as far as I know, will not be passed until probably December. So we're in a strange spot right now. We are getting state grant aid payments, but we don't have a state budget for a little while. So, okay. let me go back. Oh, maintenance, that's where we were. So that's my estimate for maintenance at 18,700 right now. I'm gonna watch that like a hawk. And I do think some things that I had mentioned as possible expenses, so like parking lot seal coat and paint, or fall and spring cleanup, or window cleaning. I hadn't put those in there yet, but I think those sorts of things could be thought about in the spring once we're sort of through the better part of the year, or the more lengthy part of the year. Okay, so next up was staff development and travel. I did reduce this by 50% to 750. We do not have, we're not sending any staff members to meetings right now, so we're not paying for mileage. And honestly, I would be very, very adamant about staff not attending in-person meetings at this point, or really in the near future, just because of the risks that it could present. So I can't say that I would approve them to go to a meeting in person right now. I think that as far as this line goes, I don't have any conferences on tap right now. It is the one coming up in January was canceled, so I don't plan on needing any sort of registration fee, even for the online one. This is really just around town errands type of things. We do pay our office administrator for her mileage when she is doing bank runs, town hall runs, things like that. So that is it for this line. Office and library supplies is next. And library supplies are things like book covers, DVD cases. We estimated about 1,700. When I say we, I rely heavily on Karen, our office administrator, for things like this, to take a look at what we're using. Office supplies is also paper, ink, toner. We are using a little bit less of this, but not much. We are still kind of making sure we have enough copies that we can pass out to people as far as pamphlets and flyers go, and that if somebody doesn't want it, they either take it or they ask us to put it in quarantine. So we're at 3,500 for this line. This has been 4,000 in the past, but the computer supplies, there was about $500 in this line. We had talked about moving that to technology maintenance. So that is gonna live there now. And I think that is an accurate number for that line. Consortium network fees. So this is lower than past years because Ocean State Libraries received a PPP loan. So they put that money directly into fees relief for libraries. So this is a little bit less than we had budgeted for, just around $1,700. So we pay this quarterly, and we paid our usual amount for the first quarter, and I believe the second quarter bill, they took that amount off. That was reduced by. I'll move on to materials if there are no questions. Okay, so for materials, this line has traditionally been at 35,000 for the year. And we have definitely been willing to put more money into this line if we have it towards the end of the year. So I'm going to recommend that we keep it at 35,000. I know in fiscal year 20, we were just a little under 35,000 at 33,800, and we were able to put more in during the course of the year. So I'm going to recommend this stay at 35,000 for now. Okay, service contracts. So this is pretty straightforward in the service contracts tab. All of these figures for each of our vendors are pretty accurate. There are a few 4% and 2% increases, as you can see, that we're budgeting for. But I guess the positive side to approving a budget later in the fiscal year is that we know of some of these increases. So I was actually able to update these, from when we were looking at this budget back in February. So we are good to go there. Some things to note were that our Encore bill for our sprinkler and pump inspection, this actually went up this year, but we did not have an increase for the past 3 years. So that was something that we were willing to, I actually negotiated a little bit with them on that to make sure that it stayed within a good respected number of where we were. The other thing, so Central Technology is our current vendor for our self-check machines. We're actually switching companies. So this year, having that switch, we will be in the 3,100 range. And then going forward, so this will be something I'll bring up when we talk about fiscal year 22 as well. This will be a fraction of what we were looking at. The trade-off is that the service for these machines, Central Technology will not provide service anymore. It will just be a software contract going forward. So I feel confident that we have not needed any sort of service and that our technology coordinator would be able to handle that if we did need service. So I think that's going to be a very good thing for this budget line next year. One of the things I would recommend is removing carpet and upholstery cleaning for this year. We haven't had the traffic that we normally have. So I think this is not something I would even consider until May or June of next year. So I think we could potentially have $3,500 savings in this line should we decide not to do this year. So I don't plan on scheduling that anytime soon. I'm going to wait until later in the year for that. And that brings me to Corel controls. If we did need a new software system, then I think that $3,500 from carpet and upholstery cleaning could really help us in that area. So that is why I'm sort of waiting on that carpet cleaning. Okay, and I think we just have one last section in expenditures here for operating. That is technology maintenance and replacement. So last year was actually the first year that we had this line in our budget. We have a 5-year technology plan, and part of it is designating $2,000 each year to replacing our older computers, whether they be staff or patron computers that are no longer working for us or have gone through all the updates that they can possibly go through and they're just at the end of their life. This is $2,500 because we took the $500 from office and library supplies and put it into technology maintenance. So that's why it's a little bit more than last year. So $2,000 for the actual maintenance and replacement, and then $500 for supplies like cords, mice, monitors, things like that.
Do we actually purchase the PCs or computers, or do we lease them?
We actually purchase them, and we get sort of like a prorated price through Ocean State Libraries. Ocean State Libraries actually purchases them for us, and then they invoice us for those. So when we start replacing for this year, it will come through as an Ocean State Libraries invoice. And they work with Dell, and I think Dell is one of the only companies that they work with as far as computers go. And these also come with support from Ocean State Libraries too. We are very lucky that we have a very strong consortium here, and they have a great team who's able to help us out with.
What happens to the old ones?
So the old ones, sometimes we will take parts of them to use in other computers in other areas of the library. But if it is something that is completely obsolete, then we do recycle it. And we make sure that the hard drive is wiped before we do that. We just had our Indie Cycle event this past Saturday, which from what I'm hearing from our staff members was incredibly popular. We had 255 cars come through the library lot in 3 hours. So we typically will save everything for when Indie Cycle comes and recycle it then.
Okay.
Oops. There we Okay, so that leaves us with a little bit of an increase for operating expenses this year. And that did not worry me because we do have a decrease later on when we talk about salaries and FICA and health benefits and retirement. So I will keep moving on if we're all set with operating expenses. Okay, so we did decide to include the Friends donation in here just because it is part of our expenses that end up happening, but this all resides in our Bank Newport account. This is not part of our town budget. So that's important to note when looking here. Moving down to salary expenses. Okay,
can I just ask a question? You said the donation, sorry, you said donations?
Yes.
Those are from the Friends, and those don't go toward operating expenses.
Correct. Yep, that's why we have them in the separate programs subtotal. Every January, the Friends vote to donate a certain amount of money to programming at the library. So all of our programming is completely donation funded by the Friends.
I see it above. I missed it. I'm sorry. Okay.
That's okay.
I saw it initially when I went through it, but I forgot about it. Okay, I'm good.
That's okay. No problem. Yep. Okay. So I'll move on to salaries. So this is where we see the biggest reduction in our budget right now. I have not filled, so if you remember back in March, our technology librarian had left and we hired one of our library assistants as the new technology coordinator. And so that left a part-time position completely open. I have not filled that. And due to us being closed and us just having reduced traffic. So that position is still open. I don't plan on filling it until around December, which is how I budgeted in the salaries tab here. We also do not have library pages right now. We actually have one, but she only works 2 hours per week. When she is here on Saturdays, she works as a part-time library assistant for us and then finishes her day as a library page. So we are saving a good amount between the part-timer not being here, the pages not being here, and also the young adult librarian was on family leave until just the beginning of October. So I did work that into the salaries budget as well. One other thing is that when our technology coordinator was hired, since he was new, he was hired at a lower rate than our current technology coordinator prior to that was being paid. So we do have a reduction for this year. We're also not calling in as many part-timers as we had in the past. We just have the staff that we have cover. We are okay with doing that for now, just because traffic has not been as much as it has been in the past. However, our phone calls are still very, very heavy. We have a lot of phone calls every day. So I've directed more staff to work on that too. So a lot of moving parts to the salaries line this year. And I hope that everything that I broke out in our salaries tab here made sense as far as that goes. I made sure to put notes in each one of them so that there was an explanation as to why certain things were different. We also only have 5 staff members eligible at this time for pay increases. We have pay ranges, as you know, so some staff are just at the top of their pay range and are just not eligible for an increase. So some of the things I did want to talk to you about were that minimum wage did increase to $11.50 as of October 1st. We have had our on-call salary or wage at $12 an hour for as long as I have been here. So I know back in February, we were thinking about increasing that on-call salary to 2%, but these are all things that I think could wait until later in the year once we've seen how the year is going. So that's an overview of the salaries tab. What questions do you have?
Well, question and comment. I see the detail for the payroll is 444, yet we're budgeting 425. And I understand why that's happening, because for the first 3 to 4 months, you really haven't had full staffing hours because the library has not been open. So I estimated, and what I did was I took a look at the last payroll that I approved versus what, because I took the salary spreadsheet you sent through and expanded it, added a couple of columns so I could see what a typical weekly payroll is. And a typical weekly payroll, based upon the hours you put in, is about 2,000 higher than what we've been incurring. So I estimate that for the first quarter, we probably saved about $25,000 in salary at least, which accounts for the difference between the 444 and the 425. And you also have an individual who's not working the full 70 hours, the young adult librarian, she's working 50. And that's basically what I looked at when I was looking at, because salary was the largest component of the expenses. So I understand where the 425 is coming from, and FICA is just a mathematical factor of whatever the percentage is. So that's not something to argue about. That's just a calculation. And you explained very well the health benefits. Excellent. No problem with that. And
Great.
the retirement as well. So I don't have a problem. I understand it entirely, completely. The only question I have is going forward, not so much when I say going forward, I mean, not this fiscal year, but next fiscal year. Okay. Whatever you saved in salary, assuming we ramp back up to our full staffing level, there's not going to be much room. That's my concern. It's not this year, it's next year, next fiscal year.
Yes, that's my concern as well. And I really need to dig pretty deep into salaries for next year, just because once we are back up to normal staffing levels, that's a huge factor. So it could be that, we potentially have to hire that new part-timer with the understanding that it may just be a 6-month position dependent on next year's budget, something like that. So in that case, I would talk to the personnel subcommittee about what they thought about our staffing levels, but things have been changing very quickly with these uncertain times. So I would be willing to put off hiring a part-timer for longer if we needed to.
As far as the salary and expenses, I'm clear. I clearly understand what's going on and why the numbers what they are. So I'm okay with that. But my concern, as I said, not to be redundant, is next fiscal year, not so much this fiscal year. Because here's my question, and it kind of leads into it. If these expenses go true to form, it looks like there'll be a little bit of a surplus at the end of the year prior to, because you're not going to realize using the entire amount that the town and the town appropriation and grants and aid give the library. So in the past, and again, I'm new to this, have we ever had a budget surplus at the end of a fiscal year for the library? And if we have, what do we do with it?
So back when I came on board, because of the high staff turnover the year that I came on board back in 2018, there were funds at the end of the year that the trustees did decide to encumber to use on special buildings projects. And so that's what they ended up doing. So that was sort of what I was thinking for this year, but just to make sure that the building projects are done within this fiscal year, because it can get sort of hairy with our grant and aid certification if we have not expended those funds by June 30th. So
we're required to spend all the funds we're given?
Yes, as per the town treasurer, this is my understanding from when I came on board.
So in the event, and again, I'm just following up, in the event we have some unexpected building maintenance issues, we have some funds that we can use, which is good. I'm not complaining, which is good. It's good.
Yes.
It's a good thing.
We're going to have a very precarious line that we're going to have to walk each month with building expenses. So I think that it's going to be something that I'm just, as I have always been, very on top of.
Oh, no,
So
this is good. This is excellent. I only have one final question, then I'll shut up. The, what was I going to say? Okay. Oh, the maintenance. I understand about the maintenance in terms of expenses for the maintenance. No, I think I'm good. I'll stop. I'll stop. I'm okay.
that's okay. I love questions. I'm a librarian. I love questions.
I thought of something, but it kind of escaped me. I'm sure I'll come up with it once I get out of the meeting. I'll say, oh, I should have asked that question. I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, great. So yes, so we have our, let me just recap the salaries subtotal. So we did decrease that by about actually over 8% there. So while we have the operating expenses that have increased, we did have salary expenses decrease. So overall, our total expenses for the library for fiscal year 21 in this budget is decreased by 4.86%. So we are in a good spot there when we look at it in that bigger picture sense. I'll move on to revenues if there are no expense questions. Okay, so revenues. So we have that strong indication from the state that we'll be receiving our grant need. This formula is based on the last 2 years of our town appropriation. So it does fluctuate from year to year. You can see there's about, a $2,500, little less than that, $2,200 difference between last year and this year. And that is lower because the state fund that our grant aid comes from is supposed to be level funded from what it was last year. Last year, there was actually an extra, I think it was around $200,000 that was put into that pool. So we did end up getting just a little bit more last year. But this year it's about a 1.85% reduction. Town appropriation, we were funded at $1 over what we were last year. So that was solidified by the FTR. The other sort of revenue puzzle piece here is our fines and fees. I really brought this down this year. We had been at like 14,000 a couple years ago, where this was, anything from book fees to room fees, printing costs, things like that. But auto renewal feature kicked in November of 2019. So since then, we have seen a substantial reduction. These fines and fees also go into our Bank Newport account. This isn't really part of our town funding. So I really brought this down mostly because of the auto renewal feature, but also we're not collecting fines right now and we have very little printing. I do think it'll be above 1,000 by the end of the year, but I really can't say. So that was my reasoning behind that. The donations are the Friends of the Library donations, and grants are sort of up in the air this year. Typically we get a legislative grant, but with the state budget not being set yet, we're not sure about that. So those are all really up in the air. You'll see that we do have funds that we could expend if need be. And those are the funds that I'd like to hang on to for building maintenance, emergency issues, any sort of cleaning supplies that we need, really the basics of library operations.
I've got 2 follow-up questions. Okay, again, just clarification. The fines and fees are not used against operating expenses?
No, those go directly into our Bank Newport account.
Okay, and so does the Friends, right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, I know what my question was before. I just remembered. I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. Okay, if you have to substitute, I know the town council, whenever they have to take money from one account and move it to another, they need approval. Do you need approval to move money from one of these accounts, trustee approval to do the same thing?
Yes,
For instance, if you need more than 18,700 for maintenance and you want to take it from somewhere else, say you want to take it from materials, we would have to approve that.
Yes, that's correct. I think it's, the technical term is line item transfer, so I do
line
need to
item
ask
transfer.
you all for that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm good. That was it. It suddenly came back to me.
Sounds good. And if I have to do a line item transfer, there's going to be a really good explanation for it, let me
Oh,
tell
I'm
you.
sure you'll have it. I'm sure you'll have it.
So Catherine, I understand there are no book fines being collected with auto renewal. The real money generator was the $1 a day on like DVDs. Is there a fine anymore for late DVDs?
So all fines, well, I should say all fines. So if somebody loses a book or DVD, we're still collecting for that. That has to still be collected for it because that's not fair if they lost it. All fines, so the $1 a day, the 15 cents per day, those are not being collected until at least November 22nd. So I know on our regular meeting agenda, I had put on there that I would like to discuss with you what we think about if we are given the option, like the local option to waive fines for longer, if we would want to do that. So I am budgeting just sort of in the short term for this with that $1,000, just to see where we are. We are still generating for printing right now, but no book or DVD or audiobook fines.
I have one more question, sorry.
That's okay.
Well, if for some reason we have an extraordinary expense, a capital type expenditure that is not available to us because we've used up all of our revenues from the town appropriation and the state, can we dip into the bank Newport to do that and emerge? But again, emergency only, not like a one-time thing, not something on a regular basis, just an emergency.
Yes, we can. I know that in the past, the board had discussed things like that. So an emergency expense, or if all of a sudden I had a family and I needed the family level healthcare from you all,
Right.
and that increase was not budgeted for, then the money would come out of Bank Newport, or we purchased the propane tank with Bank Newport funds last year.
Excellent. Thank you.
Of course.
I'm good.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, I'm all set as well.
I'm all set.
Okay.
I'm sorry I can't attend the other meeting, but we have a personal thing we have to go to, so I can't go.
Sure thing. All
I'm sure you'll miss me.
I will. Okay, so I will, would you like to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
There's all two of us agree.
Okay, so I'll end our live stream and I will see, Carol, I'll see you at 7 for the regular meeting. Great.
And next time I go to the library, I'll stop and say